Lake Placid in the Adirondack Mountains in upstate New York. Twice an Olympic venue. In February 2012, it held the FIBT World Championships for bobsleigh and skeleton. And now, less than a year later, we return. There's a little bit of snow on the ground as we get ready for the start of the two-man bobsleigh World Cup season. Hello everybody, I'm Martin Haven. Alongside me is a man who knows plenty about two-man, four-man and this Lake Placid track, US athlete Kurt Tomasevich. Curtis, great for the US program to be starting back at home.
Yeah, definitely. This is a season that will definitely favor us as far as the schedule goes. Starting in North America and especially on this track, the Americans are really looking forward to this.
Well, this is a tough track for any non-US athlete to come to. It's tough enough for you guys, but it has a reputation, Lake Placid. It's been a really difficult track to get the best of.
Yeah, it does. This track isn't the fastest in the world. We're not going to hit really high top speeds. The length is 1,455 meters, but it's just jam-packed with curves, 20 curves total. The start is pretty average start. It's not one of the steepest. It's not one of the flattest. And the first three curves are somewhat mediocre. Nothing really dangerous comes through these first three curves. But once you get through this third curve, this is where the action starts. Curve 4, then curve 5, 6, 7. It all comes so fast that there's not much time for a driver to collect himself. He has to continue to build from one curve to the other and keep it going the entire time. This is the big curve. This is curve Shady, a huge 180-degree right-hand curve, and it comes into the labyrinth. Curve 11, 12 could give some drivers a little bit of a hiccup. And out of 14, we finally have the chicane where a driver might be able to breathe once or twice before he comes into the heart. Curve 17, a big left-hand curve. 18, a little right-hand curve, but could cause some problems as well. Curves 19 and 20 are both uphill, where if you make a mistake, tap a wall in there, that can really cost you a lot of time.
We can see from the graphic, the track record dates back a long, long while. 2003, Pierre Luders, now of course coaching, and Giulio Zardo, his then brakeman, setting the start and the downtime record. It's +2 and a bit, -2 and a bit, and the temperature is starting to drop now. What is it now? 5 after 1 Eastern time. And there you can see the man who you'll be breaking tomorrow. Steve Holcomb starts #1 here in the USA 1 sled. And of course, it's the first race of the season. Of course, you're on home ice. You've had a little bit of training pre-season here. But is there that kind of first night nerves, do you think? I mean, it is the first competitive slide of the year.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was talking with Holcomb last night, and he was saying that he was kind of hoping for a little bit of that nervousness because we've been here training on this track for 3, 4, 5 weeks now. Without that international competition. So he's hoping for that pre-race jitter to really get him into the race mode that usually comes with every other race.
Of course, the races you have done are almost more important because they're against your own teammates looking for positions on sleds. Steve Holcomb starts #1 ahead of Canada's #1 driver, Lyndon Rush. Going to be a great battle there. And what about Max Arndt? Edwin van Kalker returns for the Netherlands. He will start #4. And of course, you've got to look at Alexander Zubkov, new boy Francesco Friedrich for Germany. There's a big field here as well. Some 27 sleds, 3 or 4 rookies. We got some rookie brakemen. We got some first-time World Cup starters as well.
Okay, here we go.
And there's a couple of nations, particularly I'm looking there at places like Switzerland, that have not got their regular styles on board. So all sorts of changes being run. So here we go. We are ready for the start of the World Cup bobsleigh season. Stripping down for action, the Stevens, Stephen Holcomb and Stephen Langton, USA #1. In February, it was a pretty starry time here on the Lake Placid track for the US driver Stephen Holcomb. He's one of 27 sleds from 17 different nations, ready to take on this first World Cup race of the year. And Holcomb will have a lot of confidence from pre-season training.
It doesn't seem like that long ago where you're racing here for World Championships, and that's where Steve Holcomb and Steve Langton really busted out a great start time. 5:10 this time. Last year at the World Championships, they were in the low 5 seconds, about a 10th behind right now. A lot of that has to do with just the weather conditions. You mentioned it's a little over 2 degrees Celsius. A little bit colder would have provided a little bit faster ice, but we'll be able to tell that with the next few sleds that come down.
Well, we're expecting Steve to give us an object lesson in using the right line down this Lake Placid track. Through Shady he goes. Looked like a great exit there as well, and that's one of the key points for finding the speed. Benham's Bend as well into the chicane.
Drives that chicane very nicely, straight through there. That's a very difficult thing to do.
so difficult not to touch the walls on at least one side, if not both sides, into the heart, and that momentum vital going uphill to the finish line. Langton pops out of the back there onto the brakes. 55-56. Brian Scheimer looked relatively happy with that.
Now, it's hard to tell right now, but that looked like a great drive by Holcomb. You didn't see him banging off any of the walls. There were no big skids. Of course, being the first sled down the hill, it's it doesn't have a competition to compare to, but we'll definitely see as Lyndon Rush comes down next.
Well, game to start, so important in any competition, and just the same here in bobsled. Nice, neat load.
Pretty smooth out of 12 and into 13. Right up into 14, and this is what I was talking about earlier, how he comes into the chicane. This track isn't real straight right there. There's a couple little bends, but he finds threads the needle right through the eye there and comes right through nice and straight.
And he knew the line he was looking at. One tiny little steering movement, and he was straight through. Shot the chicane beautifully. The Maple Leaf flies for Canada 1. Lyndon Rush with Jesse Lumsden behind him. Lyndon, 31 years old now, from Silver Lake, Alberta. Bronze medalist in the 4-man in the Olympic Games in Calgary. He's a real contender for the gold medal in the World Championships here. 5:10 to start from Steve Holcomb, 5:16 from Lyndon.
Yeah, so again, we weren't sure exactly where Steve Holcomb's start time stood, but now we can tell. 5:16 for Lyndon Rush. I'm betting he was hoping to be a little quicker off that start, a little closer to Holcomb.
Double tap on the wall through 3.
That difference of 600s is now expanded to 1200s.
A little rocky there, trying to hold the speed late on both those corners, keeping the speed up on the banking.
Came down a little hard off 12. You saw the tap right before curve 13. Now this is where Holcomb was straight through here. You can see Lyndon taking a couple of those taps.
And he was 2 kilometers an hour down, still 77.3 miles an hour.
Yeah, lost a lot of time. Already 4800ths of a second back. He's be well over a half second as soon as he crosses the finish line. 6100ths.
Well, he's going to be shaking his head in disgust there. You saw a little bit of a raised eyebrow from Graham Richardson, the coach. Eurotech sled in second place at the moment. Don't expect him still to be second at the end of this run, though, and I'm not sure that he will think that's a second place run either.
You can see that slap just a little bit out of the curves as he comes through right here. Curve 9 into curve 10, big shady, and he's nice and high right there. That allows him to kind of fall straight into curve 11. But again, this is where he took a couple taps to the chicane. Now again, he's being compared to Steve Holcomb, which Steve Holcomb shot that almost perfectly. So it's very difficult for Lyndon to keep up with that.
Well, there is Lyndon. Jesse Lumsden, the CFL player, with his helmet still on. And at the top of the track is Germany 2. This is Maximilian Arndt with Marco Hubenbecker, who's really pushed himself very strongly into the German braking lineup. Max Arndt just 24 years old.
Hubenbecker, definitely the tallest push athlete on the circuit. He's well over 6'5", 6'6". Push a 522. He likes to use those long levers in order to gain that momentum jumping into the sled. But 522, quite a bit behind Steve Holcomb.
Max Arndt spent a lot of time on World Cup podiums last year in both disciplines. He was a runner-up in the 2-man and the 4-man World Cup title races, so a really consistent slide.
Yeah, you can never count out a German sled. Germany 1, 2, or 3, it doesn't matter. They're always going to be in the mix for medals, podium finishes, always up there at the top.
A couple of surprise retirements from the German program just pre-season has left them in a little bit of disarray.
Shot that chicane pretty well. Pretty straight through there, 124.6 kilometers an hour, but still a little bit behind Holcomb, just a little bit faster than Rush.
Of course, everybody's going to go, well, it is home track advantage, and Holcomb has had more runs down this track this season, but of course, predominantly, the Germans have at least 3 tracks usually in a World Cup campaign that they know well. No other nation has that kind of advantage, so you take it where you can get it, right?
Definitely. We've been on this track. The Americans have been practicing on this track for the last few weeks. Germany has been shifting around. They've been to a number of different tracks, hoping that variety of practice can help them do better here in Lake Placid. You can see him taking the tap out of curve 3 there. A little bit shaky coming through curve 8, 9, and into 10. Big shady curve. And here he comes out of curve 14. And again, he shot this chicane pretty well, but already at this point, he just didn't have a whole lot of speed.
Well, Max Arndt, last year his first full World Cup campaign, really showing plenty of pace. And Edwin van Kalker, so it's just a little bit more rejuvenation going on in the Dutch programme. Sybren Jansma, the giant behind him, formerly the tallest man on tour, but yeah, I reckon Hubermecker might shave him a little bit for that. With Eurotech sleds. And new sponsorship package as well for this season. They've got 2 sleds on World Cup Tour as well for the first time in a long while. Ivo Danilevic, the coach there, cleaning off the driver's handle.
It wouldn't surprise me if either or both of the Dutch sleds are in the mix of the top 6 here as we get close to the end of the race later on today. Kind of the dark horses of this competition, maybe.
Of course, everybody now, the World Cup is going through the motions exactly, but it is building up towards one specific point, and that maximum density of 5:13 getaways, a very good start, and that's something the Dutch have always been good with.
Yeah, Sybren just an animal on the back of that sled.
All looking towards Sochi 2014. 600ths of a second off Steve Holcomb's lead. This is a really good run already from Edwin van Kalker.
He can put together this bottom half coming out of Curve Shady into the Labyrinth. This will be a key point for him right here.
Second place run at the moment. Carrying it a little high.
Not too bad coming out of Curve 14, shooting the chicane. You know, it's not a straight track right there, so it's very hard to keep the sled from bouncing off the walls.
It's the lowest speed we've seen, but he kept it clean. Little tap there in the heart, but second, yes he is. Still a big margin though, 6/10 from first to second. There's a lot of room there for somebody else to drop in. Lots of somebody else's, frankly.
Yeah, the key to that run right there was the start. He was able to compete with Holcomb through the first probably 6, 7, 8 curves and just tried to hold that closeness as he went down.
Well, he ties with Lyndon Rush at the bottom, 300s quicker than Rush at the top.
See big Sybren pushing that sled from the back end, jumps in. It's not easy for a big guy that size to jump into a sled, but does it nice and smooth.
Well, you know, you're sprinting over speed downhill on sheet ice. It's not easy for a guy of any size to jump into the back of a sled. Holcomb fastest. Van Kalker a couple of kilometers an hour away, but Danilevic likes that. Sybren closest to us. There's Edwin. He's pulled off some big results in 2- and 4-man over the years. Looks like he might be in for a bit of a season. Now, what about this guy? Latvia's #1, undisputed king of Latvian bobsledding now, Oskars Melbardis. Came from the back handles as a brakeman to drive. Dalmut Striskins behind him. This should be a start monster pairing as well.
Most of the races last year, this pair had the fastest start on the hill. 5:10 was Holcomb's start. 5:02, wow, that's a fantastic start for those guys. I bet they would have wished they would have had that last year at the World Championships. Just 100th off the start record.
That is a monster getaway. To beat guys like Holcomb by 1/10 of a second is massive.
He extended his lead now to 1:10. But again, driving isn't necessarily the strong part of this team, so they get off to a great start and they just try to hold that lead. We'll see if Melbardis can hold that lead. Now it's down to 500ths with still half a track to go.
It's not a track he knows well. If he gets to Europe and he gets starts like that, then he's going to be in the frame the whole time. Think back to a couple of seasons ago in St. Moritz when he led after the first heat. Of course, this late start number helped him, but he's still building up that skill.
Yeah, you can see that lead has now disappeared and he's a quarter of a second behind, but still definitely good enough to come across the line in second place.
Wow. Well, we talked about Rush and Van Kalker being 6/10 back in second and lots of room for somebody else to jump in. Oskars Melbardis fills his boots, but still 0.45 behind. Good run from him, though.
Yeah, when he gets more driving experience, there's definitely going to be a team that's going to be hard to mess with when Sochi comes around.
Of course, one of the things the Latvians have is they do have the track that the Russians built at Sigulda for the USSR to train on. So they've got an ice track, they've got an ice house, they've got facilities to be doing pre-season training.
Yeah, absolutely. When Sochi comes around, there's no excuse for them, really. They've got everything set up, good equipment.
And
definitely have that start.
Couple of real beasts, yeah, absolutely. And here's another man who is not going to go down without a fight, Alexander Zubkov. For him, more than anything else, Sochi 2014 will be the pinnacle of his career. On the right-hand side, a new addition to the team, Pierre Luder's there in the cap, the coach. And if he can't polish up Zubkov's driving, then there is no polishing to be done.
Yeah, just when you think the Russians are already a favorite going into Sochi, you know, they add just another expert to help them get even better coming into the 2014 Olympics.
I'm amazed he hasn't made Zubkov convert to driving in goggles. 5:14 start from Zubkov and Dmitry Chernenkov.
Very smooth so far. Now coming out of this curve 3, you'll see most of the sleds take that tap on their left side of the sled. That's not necessarily a bad thing. That tap kind of sets him up for curve 4. When you see them coming in sideways and kind of make it a double tap, that's when they're going to be scraping off time.
There's a couple of exits there, kept it on the wall, but not too long. 2/10 behind, still comfortably in second.
Zubkov typically drives this track really well, but he's definitely had some bad luck. Or I say it's to his own fault, but you know, he's had some trouble and been disqualified being overweight and underweight a couple times. But you know, when he can put together a solid run with a solid start time, he's definitely going to be in the mix of the medals as well.
He's drifted away to 5th position, 56.18. And actually, the disqualification, that's a very valid point. In the World Championships in February, he got 1 run and was disqualified on a weight issue. Everybody else got at least 2 or 3 or 4 runs. So they've got more recent experience of the track.
You're right, he did miss out on some fast ice conditions here, so it's not real comfortable maybe on this smooth, fast ice on race day.
Of course, he went on then to race all 4 heats in the 4-man, but it's the experience of this different, the sports car of bobsled rather than the big race truck. Well, Zubkov's got plenty of ice miles, started in luge, was successful in that before he moved on. There's Holke. Yay. Big monitor down on the finish dock. He's liking what he's seeing. A little bit of schadenfreude. You don't really want to delight in anybody else's mistakes, but if they're going to make them, then yeah, we'll take that.
That was definitely their reaction when they saw the Latvians come down and saw their start time, 5:02.
Alexander Kazyanov with Max Belugin. This is Russia 2. Don't forget, all top 10 finishes in the World Cup points last year go into a random draw for the start order here. 5:28. That's the slowest start we've seen so far. And that's perhaps an indication of the fact that the Russians don't have massive depth in their starting ability anymore.
For what the Russians lack in start ability, they might make up for it in equipment. You know, they've put forth a lot of funding coming into the 2014 Olympics, and they bought a number of Singer sleds, you know, sleds that have proven to win medals for other countries. So these guys are, should put together a pretty good run and hopefully make a run at the top 10.
Well, they were so impressed with the Singer brothers' work in Germany, they bought into the company, didn't the Russians part-own Singer, and they're also buying sleds from Wimmer, who are the other name to drop in bobsledding at the moment, particularly their 4-mans. The Wimmer seems to be the one that is preferred by all their drivers.
But even with the best equipment in the world, you still have to push, you still have to drive, and Kazyanov just didn't have that great run right here.
Well, again, Kazyanov in the top 10 in the overall World Cup rankings. A degree of that might be down to consistency. He's not really yet a full top 10 competitor on his day. He can be, but not always. Out of Shady, a little high on the exit maybe.
Yep, and you can see how he comes to the left side in between curve 10, 11, between Shady and 11. And you mostly want to be on the right side so you can get into 11 nice and early. Comes out of curve 14 and again bangs off the chicane walls a couple times.
To clear the track. The track is now clear from the finish to start.
When you look at it straight ahead from the camera watching the sled come to you, you can see that what Holcomb did is possible. There is room to get a sled straight through. It just ain't easy.
Yeah, there's not much room at all coming through that chicane.
Of course, if it was easy, I'd be doing it. Now, Germany 3, Francesco Friedrich having to step up late because Karl Angerer announced his withdrawal from the German squad just a couple of weeks before the start of the season. His father died very unexpectedly. He said, I cannot leave home for 6 months with what's going on here. I'm done. My career is finished, which is sad for him, but it also leaves the German coaches with a bit of a problem. 5:13 there, that's a decent start, but Friedrich, very inexperienced driver in World Cup terms.
Yeah, he hasn't been here very often, but it doesn't matter your driving experience, you can still push that sled fast, and that's what he did there, 5:13. That's a great start for him.
You won't be scared of this track. He grew up with the Altenburg track, so he knows a thing or two about roughy-tufty tracks. Made his World Cup debut at St. Moritz in January last year. Here he is, full World Cup start for the German team, just 3 races on.
Very good through the chicane. See that black sled flying through there, didn't touch a wall.
124.6, the only man who's gone quicker, Stephen Holcomb. 0.45 behind. This is a top 4 slide at the moment. 3rd place. Christoph Langen likes that.
Yeah, finally somebody was able to jump ahead of those sleds that are about in 4th, 5th, and 6th place, where we have only about 300 separating. Let's see, 300 separating 3rd place to 6th place.
Now, I was talking down his chances as a very inexperienced World Cup rookie. Here he is in 3rd as the top German sled so far.
Yeah, the Germans are so deep. Like I mentioned earlier, when Arndt was going down the track, they could place probably 5 in the top 10 on almost any track because of their expertise and the variety of tracks that they practice on.
Well, let's have a look at Christoph Langen's reaction. Listen.
Now, I don't speak German, but I'm pretty sure that nobody could understand what he was just saying to himself right there.
But you see the fists, he's still holding the D-rings, he's moving the body, doing the steering actions, he's trying to do it by remote control. Now then, Monaco, 9th start of our 27 sleds. This is Patrice Servel, their veteran driver, Elie Lefort, and behind in the blue hat, Bruno Mijon, 1998 4-man bronze medalist in the Olympic Games.
Now this season will be interesting for Patrice. In the past couple of years, he's used Got to Stowe, he's used Lascelles Brown as a push athlete, but both of those guys are unavailable to him this year. Start time here, 5:40, well behind the pace, 3/10 behind at the first 50 meters, and that's only made things very difficult for Patrice to come into the mix.
Well, Lascelles Brown was a big bonus, wasn't he? And Seb Katuso as well, European Championship sprinter, was a really good powerhouse on the back. He's missing that a little with Elie Lefort.
Patrice, though, has been around for a number of years, been on this track a number of times. A lot of experience, but just didn't have it at the start. 96 hundredths of a second back already. We've still got 5 curves to go.
At the moment, he's behind Kazyanov of Russia as well. 5:28 is the next slowest start. He's starting 12 hundredths back, and the rule of thumb is that you'll be 3 times that margin down at the bottom. He's a long way off the lead, 56.89. I think the moment Bruno Mijon saw the start numbers, he was expecting very similar at the bottom. Good speed, 124.6 is not bad at all. Well, he's an experienced driver, but didn't look like a great slide.
Yeah, it just wasn't put together for Patrice today. You see that little skid at the back end coming through curve 3, or coming into curve 3, coming out of curve 3. Takes that natural tap, which isn't a bad thing, but coming out of the chicanes, just bouncing around.
Start number 1.
Equals second fastest, but Holcomb, it's another step up, isn't he?
Yeah, Holcomb definitely drove the sections, curve 11 through 14, that labyrinth. He drove that section really well, and that's where that speed shows up.
The disdain with which Servel surveyed the figures when he was handed them was all too obvious. Well, we've got a German in 3rd place with Francesco Friedrich. What can Manny Mahata produce? Was that a stumble from the brakeman, Christian Poser?
Jumps into the sled. Sometimes when you have that little hiccup there, you kind of put it into overdrive and you try to make up for it, and that doesn't always work. That start time of 5:22, that's something he's going to want to have back.
Well, that was the same as Max Arndt, Germany 2. So Germany 1, Germany 2 on 22s, Germany 3 at 5:13.
19 hundredths of a second back already. But if anybody can bring this sled back, it's Manuel Mahata. During Monday's practice times, he's had smoking runs. He was faster than anybody else on the track.
Yeah. I remember when he arrived in Whistler at the beginning of the season 2 years ago as a rookie straight out of the Europa Cup, and was on the podium both in 2-man and 4-man with a gold medal and a silver medal from his first ever World Cup weekend. That was, hello, I'm here, and he's still here.
Yep, you're not going to find a better man to drive this German sled.
Well, he's fourth, so we've got Francesco Friedrichs, the youngest of the drivers, in third, and a three-way tie for fourth place. Lyndon Rush, Edwin van Kalken, and now Manny Mahata, all tied in fourth spot.
Here's a start. Yeah, it did seem to stumble just a little bit. It wasn't really a trip or a slip, but he really went to the left side of the grooves as he was pushing that sled, and I'm not exactly sure what had happened. Maybe his balance was off just a little bit. He could have had a little slip of his hand.
Well, the Movember thing is catching on among a lot of the US and Canadian athletes, and Manny Mahata, he's got a good Edwardian handlebar moustache and sideburns combination going on as well. Take a look at that face fungus.
A little bit of the Orange County chopper showing up here in Lake Placid.
Yeah, you're right, actually. He does look like Paul. Steve Holcomb is our comfortable race leader. 10 of 27 sleds in this bumper field in the season opener. We have lots more action to come.
No snowball throwing. Every snowball fight in history has ended badly. If there is snow in the track, it is an uneven field of play, so do not throw snowballs. It's a pretty simple cut and dry rule here at the track. Do not throw snowballs. We're going to have Nick, Simone, and Chris, the next three sliders, still with 17 sleds yet to come. Steve Holcomb still with the time to beat a 55.56.
Up next to the start house, USA 2, followed by Italy 1, then Canada 2, Russia 3, the Netherlands 1, everybody chasing USA 1, Canada 1, and Germany 2, who are running 1, 2, and 3. Down below, so Stephen Holcomb and Stephen Langton. So far, so good in the middle of this first heat of two heats. The FIBT Bob and Skeleton World Cup here in Lake Placid. And to review the schedule for the rest of the day, after this heat, we're scheduled for a 2:15 start for the women's third run of the skeleton competition. And then at 3 o'clock, this race will have its second run, the top 20 in this.
Lake Placid, the venue for the 1932 and 1980 Winter Games. Well, that track is still buried, the 1980 track in the hillside alongside us. And of course, the Miracle on Ice, that museum down there in the heart of Lake Placid itself. Lots of fans on hand watching the first race of the Bobsleigh World Championships for men. Look at the gap first to second, but from Oskars Melbardis in second down to 8th place, just 0.2 of a second, covering 7 sleds. But they're all nearly half a second and more behind Stephen Holcomb. Sitting alongside me is Kurt Tomasevich. Kurt, Steve Holcomb with just a blinding opening run to the season. He's caping up from where he left off in February.
Yeah, and that's just it. Is, he built that confidence from last year, the way we ended, winning 2 world championships and even a 3rd world championship if you count the team race. Just a lot of confidence on this track, and this is where he spends most of his time.
Well, here is the USA 2 sled, Nick Cunningham, and just Drybble behind him. Cunningham performing very well in selection races as well. Since he's got a lot of motivation, he and Corey Butner really revved up to kind of try and rock the establishment a bit here.
Yeah, if you have anybody to compare to, who better to compare yourself to than Holcomb? That's what they've been doing for the last few weeks. Andreas in the back of that sled, an incredibly strong athlete. Saw him clean 180 kilos just yesterday, or just the other day. 5'18", not too bad for them.
That's a good getaway.
Nick has hundreds of trips down this track. Takes that easy tap out of curve 3, sets him up nice into curve 4, 5, 6.
Well, his pre-season training was interrupted, wasn't it, by the hurricane, and suddenly a lot of guys here had to get back on duty to go down and help those that were in trouble down in the south of the state.
Yeah, Nick took a couple days and went down to New York, helped some people. As part of the National Guard, he felt that that was his duty. But it doesn't look like he missed too much coming back onto the track. 124.9 kilometers an hour. I believe that's the second fastest so far, right behind Holcomb.
Yeah, only one man quicker, Steve Holcomb. USA sleds. The Bodine sled still works really well through the air. 56.06.
Great run for Nick, yeah.
Wow.
You know, he was 7th off, excuse me, his rank was 7th at the start, but slowly worked his way up, went to third, and worked his way up into 3rd place, excuse me. So that was just a great demonstration of driving all the way through.
You know,
definitely happy.
Nothing healthier for a team than to have a superstar that everybody else is desperately trying to catch, because it just raises everyone's game. Holcomb doesn't want to be caught, and these two guys just want to get right to him.
Yep, absolutely. You can see Nick, this is the only track he's been driving on this year so far. And you can tell, coming through the labyrinth, right before they pick up that speed trap, 124.9 kilometers an hour. That's really fast for this section.
And still, a couple of little things he could iron out, but there's a big smile on his face, and rightly so. Well, next up is our Italian representatives, Simone Bertazzo and Francesco Costa. Costa, the young man on the back of this Italian sled, two former Olympians, one from Italy, one from Austria doing the coaching. Bertazzo had a pretty torrid start to last season, tore a hamstring early on, crashed straight through the finish area at La Plagne in the race there as well. Every time he got up, somebody kicked him back down again.
Yeah, nothing seemed to go right for Bertazzo last year, just a string of bad luck. That's the good thing about, just a new season. The athletes that did well want to continue that. They want to build off that confidence that they had from the year before. The athletes that didn't do well the previous year, they're hungry to do well this year.
The drawbacks for Italians is that unexpectedly during the month, the track at Cesana, the host of the 2006 Winter Olympic Games, closed its doors. Now, Cortina, the older track, has been trying to get back into World Cup racing, and that may yet happen, so they still have a track on which to train, but the Cesana facility is lost to them, so it reduces their opportunities for pre-season testing at a stroke.
In addition to that, they were saying that the Cesana track was closing with their push track facility too, so that's going to hurt them at the start as well, where they don't have that facility to push with. A 5:21 start for Bertazzo, not bad. But again, with the bad luck he had last year, Achilles problems, hamstrings problems, that could be a good goal for him, just to slowly work his way back up into the top few pushes.
Well, yeah, anything that hasn't involved an injury, a crash, or a breakage so far is good. That's a bonus.
Yeah, you can see how high he was in curve 14 there before he came into the chicanes. Almost hit the top of the lip with the left side of his sled.
He's a good driver. He didn't have a great start, but he does have good hands on the D-rings. And Wolfgang Stanford, the driving coach, one of those guys who could find speed on any long track. And hopefully he's imparting some of that. Well, a welcome return at the end of last season in Canada. We saw Chris Spring, whose crew had that big crash earlier on in the year in Germany. And he is back now. And this sled has been rebuilt from the wreckage. The Eurotech guys insisted on keeping the frame rails, but a brand new Singer cowl. And Spring with Ben Coquell making his World Cup debut on the back handles of the Canada 2-2-man.
Yeah, everybody's glad to see Spring back in the mix. He was one of the nicest guys on tour, and it was pretty devastating to everybody to see that the crash that they went through last year, to see him have to miss a few races. But despite all that, he was able to come back and did the America's Cup at the end of last year on this track. So he does have quite a few runs on this track. He had a little bit of a skid out of curve 3 where you just like to take that tap. He actually went a little bit sideways, costing him a little bit of a time.
They started the season as relative unknowns. In fact, they made a joke of it. They had the T-shirts, not Canada 2, Canada Who. and it's that team spirit. And, of course, it's the same in all the other teams. But it was that team spirit. When they were injured, they were all in the hospital together. They flew home together. They're rehabilitating together. If anything, it's made them an even tighter crew than without the adversity. So they're really going to be a crew to watch. It's going to second year on the World Cup Tour for Spring. Comes in just outside the top 10 in 56.35. Now listen, right at the top of the show, we're talking about the World Championships, and with Russia's Alexander Zubkov. The first heat of the 2-man World Championships, Zubkov was disqualified. A Russian slider has just been disqualified from the first heat of the World Cup, but it's not Zubkov, it's his teammate Alexander Kazyanov. So Chris Spring picks up a place as a result. He's 11th. But Kazyanov here with Max Belugin, his brakeman, they are out. And again, it's a weight issue.
Jeez, when it rains, it pours for the Russian Federation when they come to Lake Placid. They just can't quite figure out that scale when they come and do their practice runs, apparently.
When they're in training, you weigh the scabbards that the sled is carried in, you weigh the sled, you weigh the crew, and then you weigh them all together, and then you re-weigh them. And still, you can be in something here that's weighing 1,300 kilos, so 1,700 pounds. If you're half a pound out, boy, you are out. I mean, it's very, very far.
Yeah, there's a small window to play with. But again, we talked about, their great equipment, and even if they have great driving, great starts, all that for naught if you can't stay within the rules.
If you can't count, you can't do anything. Nikita Zakharov, Russia 3 then. The second Russian sled now in the field. Let's hope they did their maths correctly on this one.
Last year, Nikita, top 20 most of the time. He usually got a second run. But again, with the hire of Pierre Lueders, a great driving coach from the Canadian program, you'd think Nikita would be able to learn some of these tricks, driving some of these tracks, especially this track where Pierre has been down this run a number of times.
Starting off a 5.30 push, he's going to have to learn to drive like an angel because they are not starting fast enough by anybody's stretch of imagination.
Was left coming out of the shady curve, tap before he came into curve 13. See how he shoots the chicane. Not horrible, but 123.6 speed just isn't going to be competitive.
Not too far away from the likes of Edwin van Kalker, who's in that three-way tie in 5th place at the moment. Where does he come in? Have it at the start, so even though he's got a good wind-cheating Singer sled, didn't help him. Again, it's like a drag race. If you're up against John Force and he out-accelerates you the moment the lights change, you ain't ever going to catch him, and it's very, very similar here.
Yeah, the only person he was able to beat was Patrice, who had the 5:40 start. Obviously, long way back. And you're just not able to gain speed as you go down the track.
Puts him into 12th place at the moment, but we're not even halfway through our field. There we are. We're exactly at the halfway point in the field, so there's still a few more that can ease him out of the top 20. And 2 years out from the games, this is not what the Russians need. They don't need technical slips. They don't need to be chasing the front runners. Ivo de Bruin makes his first World Cup start of the season. He's made one World Cup debut before. And in the background, coach Nikki Minicello, former women's bobsleigh world champion. Retired a couple of seasons ago. She's now in charge of the Dutch program for men and women's bobsleigh, men and women's skeleton, and men and women's luge. Spoke to her yesterday. You've got enough on your plate? Yeah, I'm learning a lot.
I'm excited to see how Ivo does in this race. He's spent a lot of time on the Europa Cup circuit. And he's one of the nicest guys on this circuit that you'll ever be able to talk to. So he works hard, and he's had some great practice runs coming into this. A little skittish coming out of curve 2 into 3. But he's only a 10th back. Yeah, that's due to a great start.
Spent the last 2 years working with Graham Richardson on the Europa Cup program, and Graham rates him very highly indeed. Nice line through shady.
That late tap coming into curve 11, very high in 12. That's not the fastest line, but hopefully he built enough speed at the top half of the track where that will carry through. 123.9, not awesome, but might keep him in the mix.
He's top 6 at the moment off a 3rd fastest start, drifting away to 8th position. Might end up in the top 10 at the end of his first World Cup heat. He does. 56.22 slide. Nikki Minicello, not always easy to impress. She's pretty happy with that. He's only 100th of a second behind Max Arndt. Now, you'd expect normally to be right in swinging for a podium on that.
Yeah, definitely. I would think that, De Bruin, Ivo, like I said, I was hoping for a top 10. But to only be 100th behind Art, that's saying a lot. A lot of it has to do with right here. Jumping into the sled, pushing a 5:11. That's a great time.
Well, you know what else? 0.05 of a second behind Edwin van Kalker, who's got so much more experience on the ice. A couple of little errors to tidy up.
This is the labyrinth section, curve 11 into 12, very high on the late part of 12. That caused him to slam down. and just lost that little bit of time, and that was reflected in the speed coming out of the chicane at 123.9 kilometers an hour.
Well, look, we've had the women's bobsleigh race and a skeleton race as well since training finished for the two-man, so the track is probably even quicker than they expected to find it. Now then, USA 3, Corey Butner with Charles Berkeley behind him. And Corey, again, training really strongly. Brand new sponsor on the US 3 sled, Autism Speaks.
5:16, a decent start for them. You know, Chuck Berkeley at the 2010 Olympics, he's a great track and field athlete. Not a great exit of curve 2, but not too bad. He makes up for it. He comes straight out of curve 3, takes that left-hand tap, and just 0.17 of a second back so far, so not too bad. He and Nick Cunningham have really been battling the last couple years, as well as the last couple weeks.
It's kind of almost the toss of a coin who gets USA 2 and USA 3. They're so close. Nick Cunningham third behind Steve Holcomb, the leader at the moment from a 7th best start. He's coming back to 4th place now. So Butner having a really good run. 1:25.1, second quickest only to Steve Holcomb. That's a really good run coming together.
Excellent speed for Corey.
Wow, we could have 3 US sleds in the top 4. We have 3 US sleds in the top 5. 100th behind Francesco Friedrich in Germany 3. So it's USA Latvia, USA Germany, USA liking them onions.
Yeah, that's, you know, that just goes back to say that, you know, we spent a lot of time on this track, and, you know, we were really excited when the schedule came out and said that we were going to be on this track first race of the year. Again, that's that exit out of curve 2, not real smooth. You want to use that speed that you get from your great start time through the first 3 curves especially.
He was just stood out on the dock in front of us watching that error, and he just punched his fist. Oh, darn it. But look, quicker, top 3 speeds, all from US sleds at the chicane.
Attention, clear the track.
Yeah,
The track is now
liking that. Mike Kahn on the left.
Yeah, just those 2 small mistakes out of curve 2 and maybe around curve 12 area. If you could clean those up, definitely be on the podium.
Well, USA got a strong program here in North America, so too the Canadians. 3 US sleds, 3 Canadian sleds as well. There's Graham Richardson on the left. New addition to the Canadians, set up under coach Tom Delahunty. Justin Cripps has got a brand new brakeman, Jean-Nicolas Carrière from Montreal. And Cripps, you can tell the Canadians have all been coached by one man, can't you? Pierre Luders was legendary for refusing to go with the visor and sticking with the goggles. The Canadian girls and some of the Canadian guys going with goggles as well, Cripps among them.
The benefit to that is that they're not going to fog up in the colder weather, but at the same time, a lot of people will argue that they're just not quite as aerodynamic, because your eyes, and obviously you have to point them out toward the top of that cowling, and that's one of the biggest factors in aerodynamics.
Well, you know what, having goggles on doesn't seem to slow too many skiers down, and I'm sure the goggle exponents like Luders would argue if you can see where you're going, that's worth a couple of tenths somewhere, isn't it?
Definitely. You know, Cripps has also had quite a few trips down this track. And he's got a pretty decent start time. All he needs to do is just breathe as he's going down here. Relax. He hasn't had a lot of races in here, at least World Cup races.
Well, certainly.
But he's got the potential.
For his brakeman, Jean-Nicolas Carrière, this is the closest track to Quebec. It's only a couple of hours away from Montreal to our north. So this is really home ice for him. 14th place run for Justin Cripps. He won't be overjoyed with that, but they had a good start.
As I was talking about earlier, that tap out of curve 3, you want it to be both bunks at the same time. Cripps comes out and kind of front taps the left side twice and send him into a little bit of a skid. Very high in curve 14 coming into the chicane.
A lot of time your coach will say, the less you drive, the better I like it. You see a lot of them trying to let the sled run and just hope it comes the right way back off the wall. Holcomb leads. But behind him, in that gap between first and second, behind him there is a very close battle. From second to 10th, covered by 0.2 of a second, and it's just as tight behind. And that means getting into the top 10 is going to be very tricky. This is Great Britain's John Jackson. John Baines behind him on the back handles, making a World Cup debut on the GB1 sled. John Jackson going the full Movember route. Saw him this morning. Looks like he should be sliding in a stovepipe hat. He's got such a Victorian face adornment.
Yeah, all the British sliders so far have had some kind of a little bit of a skid coming into curve 1. That back end climbed up at the end. But as I say, all the athletes seem to be sporting some type of facial hair or another.
November in the English-speaking world. USA, Canada, and Great Britain is certainly growing momentum, and it's a great team thing. You know, a lot of the guys, they will all do it. Because let's face it, none of you bobsledders are competitive. You know, there's nothing in having the biggest, bushiest moustache or anything, is there?
Yeah, we compete with a helmet on, so our looks aren't that big of a factor, apparently.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not sure what runners John Jackson has on, but I'm guessing his back-end runners might be a little fatter, a little wider, because at the top of this track, the back end seemed to be skidding a little bit more than some of the others, and that just means he didn't have the control. So a thinner runner would follow the front end of the sled just a little bit better.
Well, 7th quickest start, comes across the line there in 17th place. Pete Gunn on the right, not overjoyed with that, and I don't think Jack will be very happy, because you're right, it did look like the back just didn't really want to follow the front, and that's not a great thing.
You know, in addition to that skid because of fat runners, that can also happen when an athlete loads into the sled and they come out of those grooves just a little bit late. And you can see coming into curve 1, that back end skids up just a little bit.
Well, one of the keys to being a brakeman, there's 3 real things. You've got to heft it away from the block, you've got to load and impart speed, and then you've got to ride it. It's a bit like being the pillion on the back of a motorcycle. What you do does affect what the driver can do. So a rookie maybe just doesn't have the experience of riding as still as he needs to.
Yeah, and it's a hard thing to coach. A lot of people say, what do you do when you get into the back of the sled? And we joke that we just need to ride fast. And how you do that, it's sometimes a bit of a question mark. You need to, in a sense, become part of the sled. You don't want to be a real tense ball, because then you're going to bounce around in the back of that sled and can cause those little skids as you enter the curves, just like John and John did going into curve 1.
Czech Republic's Jan Verber with Jan Stoklaska behind him. How many seasons has Stoklaska been breaking bobsleds? It's been around since I've been doing this sport. 5:23 getaway when Verber is really quite a slight guy. I mean, he's, every year he comes back, he's another few kilos heavier, but he didn't start off as a big monster.
Yeah, that's one thing we haven't talked about yet, is the weight of the sled. And you want to be as heavy as possible going down the track, but you want your sled to be as light as possible while you're pushing. So that difference in weight has to be made up with athlete weight. And so sometimes the skinny guys that come in that try to be pilots, it makes it very difficult because they just don't have that mass to bring the sled down the hill.
23.6, that's decent speed. Czech Republic, particularly in the hands of Ivo Danilevich. Think of the races he's had in St. Moritz. He's been 2nd or 3rd through the speed traps. 16th place, 56.71 between Zakharov of Russia and Savel of Monaco.
Jan and Jan, I think they have realistic goals. They're probably not going to finish in the top 10 in this race or many of the races this season, but if they can work their way up and be consistently in the top 20, that'll set them up for Sochi.
And again, of course, being European-based, they have better knowledge of those European tracks, particularly the German ones, than they do here of North America. So for them, this is, kind of a tougher start to the season. And particularly, I mean, we were talking about this before we went on air. Next week we go to Salt Lake. It's been a while since the World Cup's raced there, a couple of seasons. Well, all the sleds have to max out at 390 kilos, including the crew, and they are contained within that 2.7, 0.67 meter box. A lot of other rules concerning where the axle placements are. Those have changed a little over the winter, and particularly things like how wide the cowl, the minimum aperture of the cowl to allow the men to get in. But still allowed a lot of design freedom, and that's evident in this sled. Jürgen Lowacka with Matthias Adolf, with a nice matte black wrap. I wonder where they got that idea from.
Matte black is the fastest, right?
Oh, yeah. See, aerodynamicists will tell you, yeah, absolutely right. It's called micro-surface boundary layer climatic, or some such micro-boundary layers. Essentially, the matte surface helps trap a tiny little layer of air molecules, which makes it effectively more slippery to the ones that you're going by.
We'd also like to think it's part of the placebo effect as well. If the driver feels good in a matte black sled, that's going to help them drive fast too.
Absolutely. If your sled looks the business, it makes you feel the business. Just having lederhosen on it adds to the appearance.
Yeah.
18th place at the start. 18th place here for Jürgen Lowacka as well, finding a little bit more pace.
Rough exit out of curve 12. That shows in his 123.4 km/h speed right there.
5:34 getaway is the single biggest nail in the coffin, because again, Lowacka, like Simone Batazza of Italy is a talented driver, but when you're running with your shoelaces tied together almost, so to speak, it's difficult to really produce that speed. He comes in 16th, tied with Jan Verber.
Yeah, I know Loaker's a really strong athlete. I've seen him squat, well over 230, 240 kilos. But you need to, to have a big stride length as well.
Everybody's tied up here. We're going to send a mass start coming down.
A lot of power to get the sled moving, but you've got to be able to accelerate it fast as well.
You can see Loaker driving through the heart, curve 17. We talked about at the beginning that curve 18. It's not a big curve, but at the same time could cause a lot of problems.
Well, there, two guys tied. Jan Verber in the blue, and Jürgen Loaker in the red, black and white. Tied in 16th position out of 20 sleds that have now come down the hill, 27 field. So we have one more, and then our race is full. And after that, it is go fast or go home. So Rico Peter, who has made World Cup starts before, but only a real handful, he's now the #1 Swiss driver. Martin Galliker returning to World Cup action for the first time in, I think, 3 or 4 years in the #2 Swiss sled because of the nation's injury problems among their drivers.
Yeah, I was talking with the former Swiss coach earlier today, and he talked about Baumann having a bit of a tooth problem, an infection that kept him from coming here to North America. Beat Hefty, last year's World Cup #1 ranking, not here as well. So that gives Rico Peter an opportunity, as well as Martin Galliker.
It's difficult. I mean, you think, okay, it's a toothache, it isn't going to affect you athletically. You don't want to fly with an earache. You really don't want to fly with a toothache. So yeah, absolutely, you can understand wanting to be at home. And also, probably doped up on all sorts of painkillers and antibiotics as well. Not exactly ideal for competition.
Yep, absolutely. We don't encourage drunk driving.
No. I know the stuff I've been taking for my cold, a lot of the ingredients on the back almost reads like an IOC banned list as well. Ephedrine, I'll have that, but I know the athletes can't, so there's all that to factor in as well. 124.5, great speed, wasn't it?
Yeah, he shot the chicane very well, straight through there.
And again, like Fabian Mayer in the women's race, all these Swiss aerodynamic tricks, tucking his head under the cowling there. It might be worth 100, that might be worth a position.
Could be, by the time you get to the bottom of the track, if you're, worried about ducking your head sometimes, though, that's, if you're worried about that, claiming a spot on the race, you might have other things to worry about as well, but, it doesn't hurt.
Well, it's a routine. Kathleen Martini has done it all her career. Rico Peter obviously decides that it's worthwhile as well. And it might work. He's 200s in front of the sled behind him, 300s behind the one in front, so he's in a tight battle.
Yeah, that might have made the difference. You can see it right here. Disappears, can't see a thing. But hopefully that difference in aerodynamics makes up for it.
Absolutely right. So Rico Peter completes our 20. And the man on the bubble is Great Britain's John Jackson. If anybody goes quicker than him, then he will be out and watching the second heat. 56.92 is the time now for the remaining 6 sleds to all try and beat. Milan Janešák of Slovakia, with Martin Tezovic behind him. Janešák, the ultimate enthusiast. As you can see, not a man in the first flush of athletic youth, but he funds this program because he loves bobsledding.
5:58 start time. That's the slowest we've seen so far, but we have to acknowledge Martin Tezovic in the back of the sled. I think he went to the London Olympics as a weightlifter. Very strong athlete. I've seen him clean well over 180 kilos as well.
I wonder if the people that watched London 2012 most were bobsled coaches, because there seems to have been a lot of, immediate plundering of the athletic ranks from the summer games. Immediately, we'll have him, we'll have her, we'll have them.
Yeah, it's great for bobsled recruiting. You go after weightlifters, you go after track and field athletes. In the USA, we like to go after football players.
This as well, NFL, CFL, college football players. If you pop up on the radar, there might be an even colder, even nastier game for you to play than to be a defensive lineman. 57.45 slide for Milan Janešák. So John Jackson breathes a little easier. Janešák comes in 21st place, does not make the race.
You just can't have high expectations when you have a start time like that.
Well, he understands he's not going to win races, but he's coming to enjoy driving and not just to be right at the tail of the field. There's as fierce a harder competitor inside him, perhaps, as anybody else out there, because he's given away 20 years, perhaps, to the other older drivers, so he's got a lot on his plate.
That's true. He's been here a number of times, but really struggled through that labyrinth part. Curve 11, he was on the left side of the track where you want to be on the right side. Curve 12, he was really high on the exit. Curve 14, he might have even touched the top of the lip as he came into the chicane.
Well, here we have a World Cup debutant, Loïc Coster from France, and Romain Heinrich, his brakeman. Neither have raced in the World Cup before. And again, an indication of the French trying to find a program to put together. Bruno Mijon's glory days for France in the late 1990s, long since departed. In fact, for many years, the French program ground to an absolute halt. But Coster, perhaps the first spark of a new era. A young, really enthusiastic guy, very keen. I mean, he was just so thrilled to be here in Lake Placid when I spoke to him earlier in the week. 5-3-0 getaway.
Now, if you're building a program and kind of starting from scratch, the best way to do it is to get great athletes. Get off to a fast start, and then you can develop the bobsled driving skill. 5:30 is just not a real competitive start time at that first 50 meters.
As you say, absolutely right. If you can start, any coach would love to have a great fast team and then teach them how to crash less often. It's difficult the other way around. It takes longer the other way around, perversely, to get speed out of the athlete's legs than it does out of their brain.
Yeah, it's easier to make an athlete a bobsledder than to make a bobsledder an athlete.
I don't like that. Is that one of Scheimer's? That's a very good phrase. 1:23.7, not bad speed, mind you. So whatever vintage the kit is, got it through the chicane nicely. 16th place, makes the cut in his first ever World Cup appearance. And John Jackson of Great Britain is out of the race. Patrice Sauvel now is the man who's hanging by a thread in 20th place. Well, bienvenue, welcome, young Monsieur Coster. You have made the cut in your first ever World Cup race on a track you've never raced on before, so that's impressive.
That is something to be proud of. He was a little low going through the belly of Shady 2. That set him up into curve 11, not too bad, and sets him into curve 12. Again, a little high at the end, but not too bad, really.
Wow, interesting stuff. Lots of kids down here. Lots of ice hockey players in town. And here we go with the Korean. This is Yoon Jung-won and Junglin Jun behind him. Now, two Korean sleds made their World Cup debut in Vancouver at the end of last season. And Yoon Jun here was the four-man driver. But it looks like now that he was going to be the spearhead of Korea's two- and four-man World Cup program. And it's the first time we've had, well, I don't know if it is going to be a full World Cup career, but it's the first time the season has started with a Korean sled in the World Cup.
Yeah, the Korean program's kind of in an interesting situation right now. They're the host of the 2018 Olympics. So, they're starting to build this program, and they want to, give a good showing on their home track in 2018. So they're looking, a ways into the future and really starting to develop drivers, starting to get these good athletes in. The earlier they can get them World Cup experience, the better.
Of course, all their driving so far has been on North American tracks, who are the biggest landmass with tracks compared to where they start off in Korea. And actually, 5:24, not a bad start. He's got some good lines here.
Yeah, that looks really smooth. Coming out the chicane's pretty straight through there.
He's in the race at the moment, 18th place. A good heart. He's 20th. He's pushing out Patrice Sauvel of Monaco. Does he hang on? He does. Pushes out Sauvel. Oh, he's tied. So we have 21 sleds in a 20-sled race, 56.89 slides, tied with Patrice Sauvel of Monaco. And again, for a young driver, up against somebody like Patrice that's got lots more experience of ice, full stop. That's a good effort.
Yeah, with this program, you're looking for the baby steps, just really trying to slowly get things together.
We know for a lot of the young nations, for younger and smaller nations, making the cut is a big, significant step.
Yeah, and he has to be proud of just that chicane right there. Very few drivers have been able to shoot that chicane straight. None of the Germans did. Holcomb was able to, but for the most part, that one little section he was able to match the best in the world.
Well, his World Cup debut in four-man was at Whistler, in two-man at Lake Placid. What's next? Altenburg for his second race? They're not breaking him in easily. Well, it's a long time since I've said the words Martin Gallagher, except for I wonder whatever happened to. Gallagher back in the Swiss World Cup lineup. And Abraham Morlou behind him. Again, a name I don't think I've ever seen on a World Cup entry list. Gallagher has got World Cup experience. He's got a lot of Europa Cup experience as well.
5.25, 15/100ths of a second off the pace now.
Decent start from Martin Gallagher, 5.25.
He's putting together a pretty decent run so far. No major mistakes, nice and high through curve shady too.
Martin Gallagher of Switzerland, our 25th starter of 27. He's 16th at the moment, off only the 19th fastest start, but ooh, a horrible slide. Good speed though from the Swiss sled, 124.5. That is an elderly Hilterbrand sled, unless I missed my guess. That is not one of the high-tech new Citius sleds. That's got a proper old-fashioned Hans Hilterbrand look. He's in the race, 56.59, and he pushes out two sleds, both Patrice Savelle of Monaco and Yoon Jung-won of Korea. Well,
tied at number 6. Thank you very much.
Well, welcome back to Lake Placid. Those of you who are just joining us on the Universal Sports Network, you can see a lot of Korean faces down there in the crowd. They have just seen the Korean sled go into a tie for 20th and be bumped out as the Swiss come in 20th place. Steve Holcomb leads the first heat here, and he leads by a sizable margin, but right behind him is an almighty tussle from 2nd down to 12th place, less than 0.3 of a second, covering the bulk of the field at the moment. We've got 2 sleds remaining in our first heat of 27 sleds, and then the fast 20 go into the second deciding heat. This is Michael Cerizet, formerly slid for France, now for Belgium, with Nino van Doorn behind him. I'm Martin Haven alongside the Olympic brakeman Kurt Tomasevich. And Kurt, when you know that you're starting off outside the cut, that's the big step, is trying to force your way into the race for Heat 2.
Yeah, it's a frustrating situation. You want to break into the top 20, and sometimes you feel like the only way to do that is to have a start rank in the top 20 as well. It's really hard to climb from behind.
If it was easy, I'd be doing it, but it does mean that guys that start outside the top 20 start draw have got double jeopardy, because if they make one mistake, then they know they won't get a chance to tidy it up the second time round. These 2-man sleds, 400 kilos odd, rattle down the track. You can see the stationary cameras vibrating furiously through the chicane, 75 miles an hour.
121.2 kilometers an hour was his speed, and that's just not very fast. And you can tell a little bit might have to do with how tall he sits in that sled. He's really looking over the front of that sled. The lower he can sit and just barely see over the front of it, the faster he's going to be able to go. Aerodynamics just speaks for itself.
Well, that's a good indication of how uncertain he is about this track. But don't forget, the action started nice and early this morning. At 9 o'clock, we got underway with the opener of the Women's Bobsleigh World Cup. World champion Kaylee Humphries won, Jasmine Fenlater in 2nd place, and in 3rd place Alana Myers. And all 3 great women were rookie summer athletes.
Attention, clear the track. The track is now clear from the finish.
Our final sled on the ice, Romania's Andreas Niagu with Florin Krasuin behind him. And Kurt, to have Lolo Jones and Tiana on the podium, their first ever World Cup race, their first ever bobsleigh race of any kind, let's be frank, to be on the podium. And the 3 US sleds were 3 of the fast 4 starting sleds in the women's race. That's a great indication of what potential there is in those new girls.
Yeah, definitely. There's a lot of different theories about how to go fast down the track. And one of the theories is, get out to a fast start and just try to hold on to that lead. Let the driving come later. Try to get that experience instead of going with an experienced driver that can drive really well and then trying to give them a good start. So that's what the American women's program is doing right now.
Produced 2 medals, and it was a first-time medal for Jasmine Fenlater, Lolo Jones, and Jasmine with her family here up from New Jersey. She was very emotional at the end of the day. She's really taken a big step forward. It's going to be a big step forward for Andreas Niagu, making his World Cup debut for Romania. Florent Crusher in behind him is an experienced brakeman, but for the driver, not many trips down this track. His father, Paul Niagu, was a former Olympic athlete for Romania as well, so carrying on the family tradition. In the early days of this sport, Romania were a very big nation. 123.1, not great speed, 76.5 miles an hour. At the moment, 23rd, not enough to get him into the race. Last time the Romanians won a bobsleigh medal was on the old, even scarier track back in 1969 here. It's been a long while out in the cold. Unfortunately for Andreas, he will not get a second trip down in this World Cup race.
Sixth position.
Just a newer driver. You see, he did pretty well coming out of curve 3 on the top part of the track. Took that tap on the left side of the sled. Curve 5 and curve 6. Fairly smooth, but then the transitions get a little rough. Into curve 7, 8, and 9. That's when you can lose a lot of time.
Well, there is Andreas Niagu, the second generation of his family to come out bobsledding, and our TV producer John Morgan knows a thing or two about that. Here's Steve Holcomb then with Stephen Langton. A slew of World Championship gold medals that he had strewn around his neck in February in the World Championships here. It looks like he may be on his way to continuing where he left off at the start of a brand new season. He leads comfortably, 0.45 of a second, shooting the chicane superbly, carrying better speed than anyone else from start to finish down this Lake Placid track. And of course, next week he goes home to his home state, to his home track at Park City, Utah. Steve Holcomb leads by 0.45 of a second. That's a big margin. But look at the gaps behind. Second to 10th. 0.2 of a second, and just outside the top 10 it is equally tight. We will see, guaranteed, a lot of changes in the second heat. Our fastest 20 sleds go through, so Jürgen Lowacka and Jan Verber of the Czech Republic, tied for 19th, are the end of the field, and the remaining 6 sleds that came down legally, plus our disqualified Russian, will be interested spectators. Don't forget, we've got action coming up right after this with the women's skeleton top 10, and then we'll be back for Heat 2 of the men's bobsleigh season opener. Stay with us, live from Lake Placid.